me and my dad and the way people sort of would analyze what he was like as a prime minister and their expectations for me. For me, it was really easy to not be fussed about those comparisons because I came at it from such a different frame from my father. I came at it as a teacher. A teacher is much more interested in process and engagement than a university professor and an intellectual and a lawyer the way my father was. So for me, the same way a good teacher isn't someone who has all the answers and gives them out to the kids, but is someone who acknowledges, learns from the needs of their students to empower them to get the answers. It looks at different ways of approaching different problems as a way of empowering the students they're serving. A good prime minister isn't about telling the country which way we're going to go and these are all the solutions. A good prime minister should be about empowering communities, individuals to build a better future for themselves and making sure that they have the tools for that. So that approach of being a teacher as a prime minister is one that makes me feel like I'm still very connected to the teaching mindset that I know you are celebrating and leading in every single day. So thank you for allowing me to do that.
Gaffe of this AGM that I give my notes of that. So first of all, thank you so much for joining us. We do greatly appreciate you taking the time because I figure you're pretty busy. Maybe. So I do have a few questions, and I know people in the room would like to hear some answers. But as Catholic teachers, we're always concerned about students, the students we serve and their families. Your government has worked to make their lives easier. The child tax benefit and poverty reduction measures. Where do you see the next steps with respect to a national pharmacare plan, which would be the next logical step in supporting working Canadians, especially after the release of the report?
Just for her.
I'll be honest.
I think I'm right on the spot.
It's just an interim report. The full report's coming in about a month or two, so there's still room. I think, first of all, thank you for your words. I mean, we got elected 3.5 years ago with a promise and an approach that was very different from the previous governments. We felt that one of the reasons that under 10 years of the Conservatives, we hadn't had enough of the growth that was there for ordinary folks, for the middle class, was because they hadn't approached it the right way. They still thought, there's still a lot of conservatives out there that think if you give tax breaks to the wealthy and benefits to the rich, you can stimulate the economy that way, you can create trickle down and everyone will do better. That doesn't work, it's never worked. So what we made as a promise to Canadians 3.5 years ago was that we would invest in the middle class, support people who are working hard to join it, invest in their communities, and really look at building an economy that worked for everyone, that everyone had a chance to succeed. So the very first thing we did, you may remember this, we lowered taxes on the middle class and created a new higher tax bracket for the wealthiest 1%. Then we moved forward and brought in the Canada Child Benefit, which was an amalgamation of a number of various child benefits, some taxable, some not, that we promised would lift 300,000 kids out of poverty and give support every month, tax-free, hundreds of dollars a month to families that actually need it. More support to 9 out of 10 Canadian families. And just last week, StatsCan confirmed that not only did we lift 825,000 people out of poverty across the country over the past years, but we lifted 300,000 kids out of poverty. That has to be just a start. There's a lot more work. I know from the families that you see, from the kids that you serve right across Ontario, indeed right around the country, we see this. There are still significant barriers and challenges, and that's where you're highlighting pharmacare is a really important one. Canada is one of the countries in the world that pays more for prescription drugs than any other country except for the United States. So we obviously have a real problem there, particularly because more and more of healthcare will be delivered through prescription medication. Better and stronger drugs that they're better able to deal in on specific things. But of course, they are getting more and more expensive for personalized individual medications. And we know that the trajectory that prescription drugs are on is not sustainable for the system we have here, particularly because from province to province, from industry to industry, in terms of private plans, there is a real patchwork that means that a lot of people simply can't afford the drugs they need, and everyone is paying too much for the drugs they need. So that's why we commissioned a report on pharmacare. The first recommendation is around creating a national body that will be in charge of purchasing and the formulary to figure out an evidence base what drugs should be covered, to make sure that we are getting those prices down as much as we can. And then the next steps are going to be looking at making sure that everyone has coverage, respecting that there's a mix of systems out there from province to province. There are a lot of people who very much like their insurance plans, but we have to figure out how to make it that prescription drugs are more affordable and that nobody falls through any cracks, whether it's middle-class families who have a kid stricken with a rare disease that needs very specific drugs, or whether it's low-income families or families just starting out or seniors. I mean, there's a huge range of things we need to look at, and we know that the fairness that matters most to Canada requires us to actually deal with this, and that's what we're going to be talking about in the coming months.
Teachers in the room. So, we're going to center on a few real core values for us and social justice issues. But, for me personally, both as an educator and as a parent, climate change is something that truly alarms me, and I think alarms all of us in this room. And it's a sentiment that I believe is shared by most Canadians. How will the federal Liberal government work to make a real difference in reaching climate change goals by measures such as clean energy, despite the stance that's been taken by a number of provincial governments?
Climate change is something, and protecting the environment in general is something that Canadians in public surveys, regardless of the region, regardless of who you talk to, Canadians always feel that, yes, we need to protect the environment. And we've known about the challenges of climate change all the way back to the mid to late 80s, the challenges of the greenhouse effect and the impacts that it's going to have. Canadians have consistently talked about the fact that, yes, we should be protecting our environment, yes, we should be fighting climate change, but whether it was the Kyoto Accord, whether it was successive governments of all different stripes, there has been a lack of real, concrete, substantive action on fighting climate change from successive governments. And one of the reasons for that is governments have been pretty smart in asking people about, so, you're worried about climate change, great. What are you willing to do about it? What sacrifices are you and your community willing to make? What are you willing to do as a family? And then people say, I'm not really sure I want that. And a lot of different politicians and political parties have gotten away with doing less than we need because it's a longer-term problem that you can push off to the next mandate or the next government or even the next generation, which we're doing. And as a result of that, over the past few decades, the problem has gotten more and more acute, more and more real, and people are now realizing that, according to the IPCC report, we have about 12 years to head off a 2 degree or 1.5 degree increase in global temperatures that would have catastrophic consequences for our ecosystem, for biodiversity, for the planet as we know it right now. So we have understanding all the different pressures and causes for inaction. We said from the very beginning we needed to move forward on fighting climate change, but recognizing that under the previous government not a lot was done, and provinces did step up, and municipalities stepped up across the country. We said, you know what, every province can figure out their approach. They have to be equivalent and stringent, but you figure out what works for you. So Alberta and Quebec and BC and the Maritimes have all looked at different ways of doing things. BC's had a price on carbon for 10 years now, more than that, and it's worked extremely well. Quebec has had a cap and trade system with California for almost as long, and it's working very well. But we said it's not for the federal government to determine how they do it right across the country, but you have to do it. And most of the many provinces move forward on real plans to put a price on pollution and to actually move forward in the right direction. But 4 provinces, coincidentally, conservative politicians in charge of those provinces, including Ontario, have decided no, they don't want to. And they're using all the arguments that conservatives have always used, conservative politicians have always used for climate change. Oh, it's going to be too expensive. You know what's going to be too expensive? Not having a plan to grow the economy in the right way for future generations. It's going to be too expensive. It's continuing to deal with record droughts, record heat waves, record forest fires, record hurricanes down in our southern neighbors' shores. These kinds of things are going to get more and more costly. But we understand the concern people have. So what we've done when we've had to impose the federal frame on provinces that won't do it is make sure that, for example, the average family of 4 will come out ahead with the new price on pollution. So in Ontario, everyone right now at tax time will get $300 off of their taxes because the average family of 4, 80% of all Ontarians, will spend less than that with the new price we're putting on pollution. And that approach of tangibly fighting climate change while supporting families as we do that is the key to making sure that we actually do it, and we will. Of course, the price on pollution is just a little piece of it. We've also moved forward with a world-class oceans protection plan. We're investing in marine and land protected areas in a way that we haven't ever before. We're investing massively in renewables, in new technologies, in energy efficiencies. We're doing a whole bunch of things that are moving us in the right direction. But always recognizing that you can't actually move forward on protecting the environment unless you also have a plan to grow the economy and manage the changes that we're doing towards a low-carbon economy while we're still dependent on fossil fuels, which we are and will be for a while still. The key is making sure we're investing in the right ways to get off them as quickly as we can, and that's what we're working on.
As teachers, we're fortunate in Ontario to belong to a defined benefit pension plan, and your government made it a priority to improve pensions for all working Canadians with the changes to CPP. As you're aware, there's a private members bill, Bill C-384 by NDP MP for Hamilton Mountain Scott Duval regarding pension protection. The bill seeks to provide protection for those workers who pay into their company pension plan for their work life only to see their pensions disappear when the company goes bankrupt, such as Canada. The bill will make those employees first and not last in any bankruptcy settlement claims. Will your government support such measures to protect the hard-earned pensions of working Canadians?
As you said, we have taken a number of measures concretely on that. We brought the age of retirement back from the 67 that Stephen Harper had moved it to, back to 65 for OAS. We've moved forward on a number of things, including strengthening the CPP. I mean, when we look at the trajectory from the Canada Pension Plan, what was going to be very clear was that a lot of young people who are getting into the workforce now, in their 20s, maybe into their 30s, who are not going to have the kinds of pensions and company pensions that, because they're changing jobs, changing careers so much, the nature of career paths is changing so much, that we realize that many of them, most of them, too many of them anyway, were going to get to retirement without having enough in their pension plan to retire. So the changes we made to strengthen the Canada Pension Plan is It's not actually about people retiring now. It's about what retirement is going to be for people who are right now in their 20s and 30s and who will be facing multiple different career changes, most likely, and might not, at the age of 65, be able to retire. And that's the kind of forward thinking that we're trying to bring into that. On the issue of company pensions, that's a really important around bankruptcy. That's a really important point. But first of all, we recognize that when a company actually does go bankrupt, often it's at the last possible moment, and there's not all that much that can sometimes be done at that point. So that's why we've moved in for boosting different programs to make sure that as a company starts to face difficulties, the workers aren't already starting to get stretched and squeezed. On the issue of what happens when a company like Sears goes bankrupt, one of the things that we know is that when companies start to face difficulty, many of those companies will turn to investors to try and get an influx of investment, to try and save their company, to set it on the right path, and they'll bring in significant amounts of capital. And if when you're bringing in those significant amounts of capital to a company under duress, that capital doesn't at least have an opportunity to be paid back early on if the company does go under, what you're going to get is investors who will look at a company in trouble and say, I can't risk my money on this. And you'll have actually more companies go under because they can't reach out for new capital. So that's sort of the negative potential unintended consequence of saying pensioners have to be absolutely top first on the list for any money that's in the company. So we have to make sure that we are protecting pensioners and we are moving forward in a way that solves for that problem of new capital coming in. But our goal is, yes, to protect pensioners, to protect people's retirement savings that are in a particular company, while at the same time preventing those companies, in many cases, from collapsing and from being able to not access the capital. So there are unintended consequences around that particular bill. It sounds like a great thing that we need to think through very carefully, but I can tell you, if we do not support that specific bill, it'll be because we have a different, and I would obviously say better, idea about how to reach that same goal of supporting and protecting pensioners of companies that go bankrupt without encouraging or allowing more companies to perhaps falter and fail because they can't get investors when they're going through tough times. So that's the balance we're looking for, but that goal of making sure that someone who's worked all their life and paid into a pension plan actually gets that support that they so hard worked for all their lives, and that the benefits don't go to New York hedge funds and people who really are not thinking about the real impact on families, individuals, and entire communities, whether you're talking about Sears or whether you're talking about steel companies, whether you're talking about a range of things that we've seen recently. So it's a problem we're dealing with. We're just going to make sure we're doing it in the right way.
So bouncing around on a lot
of
different topics, we can't get all these questions in. But I want to thank you. OECTA had its inaugural Women's Conference in November, February. I truly thank you because your video to participants was a real surprise for them because we didn't tell them it was coming. I'm very happy to have that. And I know I have to tell you, I have the privilege of attending the UNCSW, United Nations Congress on the Status of Women, as a CLC delegate for the last several years. And it was truly refreshing in March of 2017 to have Canada and yourself present, but certainly to have Canada be more center stage, because we had been invisible up until that point during the Harper years. And Canada has so much to share. And so we truly appreciate you being there, because I know for all of the Canadian women that attended, it was truly inspiring to see that Canada once again was going to be front and centre. But, you know, you've worked to promote equity and women's rights. However, recent events may have brought into question your commitment to this. How would you respond to that concern?
First of all, happy belated International Women's Day. That was yesterday. We were all celebrating. Gender equality and fighting for better gender balance and better opportunities for women, and with that, multiple intersectionalities that we have to look at the barriers that exist as we layer on identities as well, is not just about doing the right thing or the moral thing or the progressive thing. It's actually about doing the smart thing. You cannot create a successful society if you are holding back half the population. It's that. So we have been, from the very beginning, committed to that, whether it's a gender balanced cabinet, whether it's moving forward on a budget that featured a gender lens on everything we did in 2018, or more recently moving forward with pay equity legislation that is finally going to actually make a real difference in the fact that Canada, despite all the good things we are doing and all the things we can be proud of, is still stubbornly low on the list of countries around actual pay equity within our workforce, and that's something we have to address. So we're going to keep working on that, and I'm going to stay committed to that. Obviously, we have faced a tough few weeks in regards to some of the members of our team and some real differences of perspective and opinion. And I regret that it has happened this way, and it's certainly something that we are learning a lot about, rethinking some of the processes of how we support cabinet members and caucus members, how we function as an office, and getting outside advice on that, because internal disagreements like this need to be understood, need to be dealt with in a better way. But at the same time, most importantly, need to not distract or detract from the work we are doing. And the number of people who don't believe in what we're doing, who are leaping on this as proof that somehow everything we've done is wrong and wrong-headed, is a little bit frustrating, but is part of our political system. And what I am very much focused on is continuing to do the big things, as we have over the past weeks. I was up in Iqaluit yesterday for an apology to the Inuit that they've been asking for over 10 years now, on how Canada treated them during the tuberculosis crisis in the 40s and 60s. The week before that, I made a huge announcement about the fact that Canada is joining in the international NASA-led effort to go to the moon in the coming years, and that's a big thing for science, technology, engineering, and math. For all you science teachers out there, I'm very excited about that. There are huge elements of the curriculum that will be impacted by what we're doing, because we need to, the same way I got my fascination in science when I wheeled a TV into my classroom at Rockcliffe Park Public School to watch the space shuttle land for the first time. That for me was oh my God, that is so cool. And these things are going to excite imaginations when we're approaching STEM. So all this to say, we are continuing to do really big things, really important things. We'll continue to stay focused on it. And I think in the coming 6 months, as we approach the election, Canadians will see that, yes, we go through tough times like any government does, but the way we handle it, the way we stay focused on the things that really matter, the way we learn from it, especially, and the way we grow through it, is, I think, what Canadians expect.
Switch again. In a series of decisions over the past few years, the Supreme Court of Canada has affirmed workers' rights to organise, to bargain collectively, and to strike. However, we've also seen several examples of governments intervening to end or prevent job action by the workers. For example, your government recently passed legislation to end a strike by the Canadian Union of Postal Workers. In Ontario, the Ford government has passed legislation to end a strike by CUPE members at York University and intervened preemptively to prevent members of the Power Workers Union from striking. Can you tell us what your government will do to protect and enhance the rights of Canadian workers, including teachers, to a free and fair collective bargaining process and the right to strike if necessary?
You may remember one of the very first things we did as a government was repeal the anti-union legislation that the Conservatives had brought in 525 and since that forming government, we have worked very closely with unions across this country, particularly the Canadian Labour Congress. Sam, I heard Hassan might be here today. See, there we go. Good to see you, Hassan. And I'm actually very, very proud of our approach around the tripartite process, which recognizes that government, businesses, and labor need to work together. And we're very, very proud that over 3.5 years of cleaning up all the collective bargaining that the Harper government had put off, of actually moving forward on a number of successful negotiations. We, until very recently, didn't have to bring in any legislation on that, and we avoided it. When we got to the situation of having to bring in back to work legislation on on the Canada Post situation, we had done that at the end of an awful lot of mediation, of back and forth, of trying to keep people at the table, trying to bridge those differences. When we finally had to do it, as Christmas was approaching, we didn't set any terms, we just sent them to binding arbitration to try and work things out. Now, I don't say this to say that it's okay. Obviously, I really rather would not have had to bring in back to work legislation. I think we've shown step by step that we're going to try and avoid that. But there are things, tough decisions that we have to make in government sometimes. And what we tried to do, certainly learning from the way the Harper government had misused back to work legislation, was to do it with the lightest possible touch to just get people back to the table to try and negotiate, as opposed to interfering with the right to strike, which is super important and fundamental for me in a free, modern society like ours. And that's what we'll continue to do. So I'm trying not to be overly political, but I'm a little bit bristle at the fact that we're looped in on this issue with the Ford government that brought in that legislation as one of the very first things it did as a way of attacking educators, attacking education, particularly underpinned with ideological or at least political partisan considerations. That is not the way we do things. It is not the way we will do things. We will be responsible, but we will try and do it every time in a way that is balanced and reasonable and fully respects not just the rights of workers and the importance of labor, but the essential nature of the labor movement in protecting and supporting the middle class in this country. Of course.
I'm going to ignore you, Mark. Nothing new there. Anyway, so not that we expect you to give us any secrets, although we're all friends in here, so you can tell us what In the last provincial election in Ontario, voters were willing to look past contentious issues and controversies that plagued the Liberal Party. And in light of the ongoing SNC-Lavalin controversy, what can your party do to ensure a similar fate does not befall federal Liberals in October?
I think a big part of it needs to keep us listening and learning and hearing from people who are concerned, who have questions, people who support us very much in what we're doing and what we've tried to do, what we've accomplished, and are worried that this is somehow a distancing from our values or a mistake we're making that could have consequences that could lead to a suboptimal outcome in the next election. We don't want back to school next year to be back to the Harper years. We all get that. So, what we are, first of all, this is an issue, has been an issue over the past weeks, that puts right up against each other two fundamentally important things for me and for this government. One is the importance of protecting jobs. Jobs right across the country. Lavalin employs people from Corner Brook, Newfoundland to Grand Prairie, Alberta, passing through Calgary, Regina, Port Elgin, Ontario, and a lot of different places where we know that doing what we can to protect jobs is what people expect of us. But to do that in a way that protects and upholds our institutions and the independence of the rule of law and the independence of our justice system is also really important to me. And through this entire issue and the complications around it, Canadians need to know, as even the former Attorney General stated in her testimony, there was no breakdown in the rule of law. There was no breakdown in our institutions. There was a disagreement about the best way to move forward, and there was certainly an erosion of trust in my office that I absolutely need to learn from and deal from and do better in the future, and that I take very, very seriously. But throughout, we've remained true to our values and focused on the things that really matter. And this coming fall, Canadians will go to the polls and we'll have a choice to make. And the choice that we make will be very much about the future of our communities, the future of the direction of our country. But it also will be fit into a frame that is much larger than just Canada in this election, unlike some elections in the past, where we see our closest neighbor, the United States, roiled in a kind of toxic populism, political debate from all sides that is really heart-wrenching to see in what has often been described as the world's greatest democracy. This is a really difficult time for politics in the United States, and there's a lot of really important things that simply aren't getting done because of the way politics is happening in the United States. Our two founding European nations, the UK, with Brexit being a total mess, a total challenge, a very divisive issue that has ground the government in many ways to stop not being able to deal with a whole bunch of different things because it is in a very existential challenge right now about what their future is, which was also happened because of an impulse of populism and knee-jerk reaction against institutions and in favor of cynicism and negativity. And in France, the Gilets jaunes are a huge reaction against what they see as a government that is, demanding too much, too high in taxes, and disconnected from people. So there's a lot of, and that's just our closest connections. There's a lot of challenges all around the world right now in democracies as we're seeing values and things backslide. And people are looking at Canada and looking at us as a thoughtful, progressive, positive government that believes in the rule of law, that supports the courts, that supports unions, that believes in reasonable discourse and believes that reasonable people can have very different opinions about the way to go forward, but can actually air those opinions and perspectives civilly and work it out and figure out the best way to go forward, as we always have, as diverse perspectives need to remain a source of strength for us. And that is going to be at play this fall, not just which party gets to govern this country as of next fall, but what values and what approach are we going to dig into the politics of wedge issues, of fear, of empowering extremist voices, intolerant voices to make political points and exaggerate and emphasize and enable anger and cynicism amongst citizens? Or are we going to do what quite frankly, teachers have always done from time immemorial, which is set high expectations of the people you serve. Look at Canadians and say, we're facing big challenges, and we're going to have to make some tough choices, but here is the reasonable path forward, and can we all rise to this rational discourse and figure it out the way we've always figured out our big things, by working together, as opposed to pointing fingers and dividing ourselves into us and them and being angry. And that is what I think we're going to see on display in the next election. We have a conservative leader right now who, he's just in the news right now because yet again he's shown that he simply doesn't hear and doesn't notice intolerant comments. He was in a town hall he calls a town hall a couple of days ago. It'd be nice if he let the actual public into his town halls, but that's another thing. But someone made just a terrible comment about a bit of fake news that is absolutely heinous in its substance, called Pizzagate, and it was attacking Hillary Clinton. And his response was, "Oh, I didn't hear that comment in the question." Well, whether it's the convoys that come onto Parliament Hill that are filled with good people who are worried about their jobs in the oil and gas industry and have right to be worried about what they're going through, and that we are very much trying to support as best we can. But that movement has been taken over or drowned out by some of the fringe elements within it that, quite frankly, Andrew Scheer has consistently not acknowledged and not heard. If there's one thing we need to do as Canadians is be vigilant about the intolerant extremist voices coming from all sides and stay true to the values of respect and openness that have served us so well as a country, and that is going to be in play in this upcoming election, and that is why I'm counting on you and so many people like you right across the country to make sure that this election remains thoughtful and civil and we keep moving in the right direction. Merci beaucoup, les amis. Thank you so much.
Mr. Prime Minister, on behalf of the Catholic teachers of the province of Ontario, I want to extend our thanks and gratitude for you joining us here today. I think your government's progressive social policies stand in stark contrast, unfortunately, to our provincial government, who believes, through Mr. Ford and the Conservatives, that less is more, and those who need most help should find it on their own. And so thank you. We wish you great success in this upcoming election, because we need the type of leadership you and your party has shown to continue to move us forward.